Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's Wildcard Sunday, and today we're going to be looking at one of my own comics. I've already done the review for issue 1 and 2 of Big Baby, Tales from the Id. Today we'll be looking at issue number 3. So a few things to know before we start. Big Baby was always intended originally to be just a first issue, 12 pages. That was my first goal. Can I do that, right? And I was able to pull it off with a lot of work and still kind of with the idea of continuing the series, right? But at least getting that first issue done. 12 pages doesn't seem as daunting as 20, 22, 24, 38, whatever. So I started with that and that worked out pretty well. So I did a second issue, which was also 12 pages. And basically what I would do is I would, on small pieces of paper, I would plot out in these little thumbnails the next few issues. So when I got to this one, I actually had 2 issues plotted out, issue 3 and what I thought would be issue 4. But then, I started thinking about the release date. It was going to be early December, right before Christmas. So I figured, why don't I make it a Christmas issue? Is there anything in the story inside relating to Christmas in any way? Not at all. The only kind of Christmas related thing is the cover here. So kind of a cheap marketing ploy, but I was going to use it anyways. And then I figured, well, you know what? If I really hustle and get both stories done for issue 3 and 4, 2 12 page stories, maybe I can combine them into one comic and make it my first 24 page comic, right? Also sell it for double the regular price. So that's basically what I did here. And I figured, let's make it a Christmas issue and a double-sized issue. Let's put all the chances we can behind this book and see, how much of them I can get out there. So that's what I did. And what you see before you is the result of that Big Baby Christmas special. With only the cover really relating to Christmas. So this creepy Santa kind of vibe, right? And a bit of inspiration came from the Ultimate Warrior series. I haven't in the archives. I've reviewed it. Check it out if you're interested in that. But there's a Christmas special there where it's a bunch of pinups, but it's kind of loosely a story where the Ultimate Warrior kind of beats up Santa Claus or takes Santa Claus's place or something. And I always thought that was very weird to have comic book characters, big muscular, dudes dressed as Santa, pretending to be Santa. And that's where the inspiration from this came. So definitely wanted to make people feel a little bit uncomfortable for whatever reason you can imagine, really. They're just sad because Big Baby and kids cry when they go see regular Santa anyways, right? So it's kind of a play on all of that. Big Baby himself is not a character who would do anything, dastardly to children. Well, I can't say that actually, because in last issue he threw a baby out of an airplane. So I'll just leave it at that and move on, right? Don't forget, Big Baby is always kind of like ideas that I come up with, whether they're obscene, whether they're triggering or other people won't enjoy them or laugh at it. I feel it's my duty to then actually go through with the story and put it in the comic. So let's open her up and have a look inside. So speaking of getting triggered, oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, so every issue I always include kind of a pinup homage illustration, right? Homaging either movie posters or other stuff that's out there in pop culture. And this one specifically is after Stomer. I think that's how you pronounce that. It's this basically painting of the wise men encountering baby Jesus. So I figured that in this case, they would encounter Big Baby as a baby. And of course, giving the old salutation, I don't think Jesus Christ would be putting out there. But, again, just for laughs, if you're offended, well, there's not much I can do about that. And I had a lot of fun doing this one and creating in that kind of, this is a painted style. So I kind of had to translate it a little bit with the hatching and stuff. I think it came out pretty well, though. So 2 stories in this one. The first one is The Church of Woke, and the second story, Living with Baby. Story and art by myself, Max Rex. Nick Saviano was doing my letters, helping out with the text stuff. So basically my font that he created for me, and he was doing the actual lettering and placing and stuff. So he was helping me out early on with that. Eventually I took over that aspect of the work myself when I was, felt knowledgeable enough to do it myself by hand and then just by computer font. So we encounter our main character, Matthew, who is kind of, I guess, the host for Big Baby. Big Baby being the id of Matthew, right? The aspect of him who has no social graces and just kind of says and does and what he feels and what he thinks is right, whether right or wrong. Being accosted or a bunch of kids running around him, right? Out of the way, mister. Yeah, we got places to be, bro. Move it. So not the most polite bunch of kids. And what we find out on the next page is that they're running to, I guess what is a comic convention. What's advertised here is Meet Gargle Comics' fresh new gladiators, here for months. This is a play basically on a few years ago. And I guess, again, this came out in 2021. This is almost 5 years ago, where Marvel started introducing these, what I would deem, for lack of a better term, woke characters or LGBTQ characters, and really kind of forcing it. And they introduced a bunch of characters for the New Warriors, right? And it really didn't get off the ground much and wasn't very popular and didn't last very long. So I'm just doing kind of a parody of that here. So they're called not the New Warriors, but the Fresh New Gladiators. And, here for months obviously implies that they're not going to be around for a long time. So obviously Gargle Comics, I'm talking about Marvel Comics, right? And you're going to meet my Stan Lee analog as well. So Matthew's curious as to what's going on, obviously. So into the convention hall and to, the most popular hall was always Hall H, I think, from what I hear from these San Diego Comic Cons and stuff. I've never been personally, but that's what I've heard. Just picked a different letter that sounded funny, Hall Q. And when I'm introducing this guy, you don't see him right off the bat. You're going to turn the page and get the reveal as to who he actually is. I mean, you can kind of guess by seeing this, right? Already looks pretty much like a wig, if you know anything about Stan Lee. But, what I had fun with here was kind of just taking Stan Lee's expressions and Stan Lee isms and finding another way and different words to use to get the same idea across. And to me, it ended, I don't know if everyone thinks it's funny, but to me, it ended up just sounding even funnier than the original Stan Lee kind of adages and sayings. So, hear ye, hear all, to all followers of the lofty Gargle path. So the mighty Marvel way, right? The lofty Gargle path. I call on you, my faithful. Uncle Artie has taken umbrage with the anemic utterances from the accounting unit at Gargle. So U's and A's, right? Alliteration all over the place. Uncle Artie is obviously Stan Lee's uncle, Martin Goodman originally. So here I called him Artie. So anemic utterances from the accounting unit at Gargle basically means they're not, Uncle Marty doesn't think we're making enough money. So enough said becomes sufficiently postulated. I'm sorry. I think it's pretty funny, whether other people do or not. We produce the mindless drivel you love the Gargle way. Amply stated. So is that, what's that from? Enough said, I guess. Amply stated, sufficiently postulated. I guess they're both two versions of the same thing. All right, pipe down. So Marty, not quite sure who's this guy? This is kind of a, I will say, I guess, a continuity thing where he's not quite sure who this is, right? And later on we find out that he's kind of like me, because he is me, right? A comic book artist. So you'd think he'd know who Stan Lee is, but that's okay for the needs of the story here. And maybe later on, it doesn't need to be addressed, or maybe, it's possible to work in the cartooning industry and not necessarily know who Stan Lee is. Maybe. In this world it is. So the guy next to him, the nerd at the convention, says, "Are you even for real? That is the Funky Flashman himself." So that's a big clue. That Funky Flashman is a character that Jack Kirby created at DC in the 70s and was basically a parody or an insult to Stan Lee. So here's my Stan Lee. His name is Dan the Man Glee, right? Because Stan the Man Lee, if you've never heard that expression, right? And trademark and copyright here, of course, because, Stan Lee is known to take credit for himself. So that's kind of what I'm going with there. Visage forward, real adherents. So face forward, true believers, right? Is what that means. And see how he's, the sound effects, grab. He's grabbing his own phylactery, his own word balloons, right? Because he's just, again, he wants to take credit for everything. That's the idea behind that. Now, meet your brand new fresh Gargle heroes. Are you ready for Vanilla Fudge? Or over here, I just threw this in. Kirby fingers, trademark and copyright Gargle Comics. So the squared off kind of Kirby type fingers. He's taking credit for that too. But let's not forget to include her brother, the dandiest lad of them all, Safety Blanket. So obviously, I'm using these terms to denote the new woke characters, right? So the design is definitely based on those two characters that were introduced as the new warriors, right? So just to play on that. And of course, we've got kind of a more masculine lady here and kind of a more feminine guy here, right? Is what I was going for. I didn't want to get too insulting because, as you see with the story, the goal here is not necessarily to be making fun of these people, right? That's not the idea behind the plot here. But you may feel that, and you may be led to think that in the beginning of the story, right? So how's that for a modern twist? Pretty soon they'll be letting the gals out to work. Yeesh. So that's another play on Stan Lee back in the day, kind of being, I guess in modern terms, a slight misogynist, right? And some of the things he would have Sue Storm say in the Fantastic Four have kind of been pointed out as being kind of like that guy's point of view of what their place in society is. With all that to soak in, what say you, my gargled deadites? So deadites are from Evil Dead, I think, that term, but my Marvel minions or my Marvel acolytes, I forget there's a term there, the Marvel fans, right? But everything gets twisted around this world, and of course, Marvel fans become gargled deadites. Drawing a crowd is never fun, but when I look back, I did have fun with some of these characters. I like that they're all kind of slightly different and distinct, right? Not just the same faces over and over. This is one of my friends, Bobby G, that I threw in there. So, of course, fandom has the reaction that fandom had back when these characters were introduced, if you remember that. Oh, yeah, I forgot about the kid smoking. I'll just, again, there we go. Kid here. His eyes look pretty glazed over as well, like he's high on something. So, yeah. Let's just throw in a kid who's smoking and super high. Anything to offend. So, close up on my nerd guy shows he's got a lot of plaque on his teeth and some stringy nose hairs coming out there. You know, that Ren and Stimpy influence, you know, when you go in and you show kind of the clearly disgusting aspects of someone up close. So there, everyone laughs, and of course, Nerd Boy says, "Haha, good one, Dan. You really had us all going there for a..." Shut up. What the hell is wrong with all of you? This is the Gargle Comics pablum you will ingest. Kirby Crackle, trademark and copyright Gargle Comics. Excelsiorly. So again, I'm just playing on the fact that Marvel is, I feel, mostly feeding people pablum. And again, I play on all the Stan Lee expressions. Yes, the Stan Lee nose here is purposely made to look a little bit like a penis, right? You got to throw one in there once in a while. So Stan says, we put a lot of cash into this, folks. Uncle Artie needs some returns. These get-ups are not cheap. So I'm, of course, obfuscated. You've got to be kidding me. This is where you're at now? This is just insulting. I'm out. Where are you going? Come back here. You dare to question the superiority of the sturdy Gargle Manor? Heathen. The Mighty Marvel fashion, or Mighty Marvel Manor, I guess is the play on words there. Love the Kirby Crackle look that I gave him when he's angry. I think it works really well. I actually used a template for these circles here because they do look pretty darn circular. Later on, I would go to a kind of more, how could I put it, scratchier, more abstract circle, right? I've always liked in this panel, like the characters here. I feel like I did pretty well with the background characters. Once again, this guy here, just something about him just works for me, and I really like him. Kind of like a European vibe to the art there. So Dan the man says, this is what's what with today's crowd, Real Adherent. This is the new normal you must accept. What are you, a contrarian? And of course, that's the moment that triggers Big Baby's release. And in this case, the release actually happens as he always comes out of Marty's orifices. In this particular story, it's I finally went with the butthole. So the pants kind of just explode and just rip are annihilated. And Big Baby is released from his anus. And Big Baby says, I do hope that the symbolism of my exit through the posterior is not completely lost on you. Yikes. It is where your particular brand of corporate moralism belongs. Again, you know, kind of hoity-toity way of using Big Baby to speak for kind of what I think about these situations, right? As a figurehead, you've lost all credibility. You are bought and sold. So he smacks Stan Lee out of the panel, and the wig stays right here. Peddling your wares to the weak and gullible. I too can ejaculate rage power from my oculars, as Stan Lee was doing earlier visually, right? And this is where I show you like Big Baby's Kirby Crackle is a little bit different and dirtier. I can make it spew forth from my whole anatomy. And again, a little bit of philosophizing on my part, but I'm using this double page spread. just to be weird and awkward. With basically what's happening here is Big Baby is like sweat ejaculating all over everybody, for lack of a better way to describe it. That was the general idea. Use the power of individual thought and liberty to crush any and all forms of social manipulation. Break the shackles of the corporate-sponsored prison you find yourself in. Follow your own path or persuasion, no matter the opinion of others. Break free. And just, again, the funny idea that everyone's like just super happy to have Big Baby sweat ejaculating on them. And now we come back to our, quote-unquote woke characters. So what now? What happens to us? And, this is maybe where you'd expect Big Baby to, quash them or smack them or whatever. Both excellent questions. I will simply answer this, my friends. Today is a great day. Today is the day you finally start living your own lives and making your own choices, which is basically the idea behind this whole short story that I've got here. That's kind of what I was trying to get across. Hopefully it worked with a bit of a swerve worked in there. So the second story, okay, A Tale from Big's Past, Living with Baby. This is pretty much a real story, other than the fact that I don't turn into Big Baby. So clearly I'm a little bit younger here, right? And this is something that happened when I was about 26. And I was living in an apartment with 2 roommates. I'd started with a few friends who were roommates and who had eventually moved out. And I'd had to basically take on, roommates that I didn't know beforehand. And huge mistake. And you'll see why in the story here. So pretty much everything in the story is taken from real life. Most of this happened, except of course for my transformation into Big Baby. I mean, I took on that attitude at that point, as you'll see when we get there in the story, but not literally becoming Big Baby, obviously. So here I am, kind of angry, right, in the kitchen. Stupid roommates. They're just sitting there having a laugh. Ha, 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 whatever. Not, the idea here is that they're not doing anything, and I'm the one here, hands deep, cleaning the dishes, right? And most of these dishes are theirs, right? That was kind of what would end up happening. They would just leave their dirty dishes on the counter, and eventually I would have to wash their dirty dishes to be able to have dishes for myself, right? Again, you take stuff from real life. This is probably the closest to real life of the Big Baby stories. There's a few where it gets pretty close as well, other than this one. Hey guys, is there any chance you two could clean up your dirty dishes, preferably before I need to use them? See, basically what I was saying worked in the story. Yeah, for sure, we'll get to it. Stop being such a downer, dude. And that was generally like the kind of answers I would get back, and I would be like, oof, but like try to keep it together, try to be a nice guy, right? Kind of keep it in. That's what's going on in this panel here. I think I conveyed that pretty well. They were my annoyance. And I like the fact that, they're all kind of taken out of their moment and sunny, and then they get kind of dark because they're being jerks. I like that visual cue there that I worked in there. Not bad. Kind of works. Here's a good one. When you get to the shower and, you get to the sink and the bottom of the not the sink, excuse me, the bottom of the bath, and just hasn't been cleaned out, and it's just like a jungle forest of pubes, right? Gross. Guys, there's literally a pube storm left in the bath. Are you guys kidding me? Of course, now I'm a little more angry than before, right? It'll get done eventually, man. We're on it, dude. Chill. So this was generally the reaction from my roommates. The kind of, anytime I'd ask them to do anything or clean anything up, this is what would happen. I don't show it in the story here, but it actually got to a point where I said, if you're not going to wash the dishes, keep them in your room. I don't want to see them. What ended up happening, you could probably predict this, is that there ended up being no more dishes in the kitchen, and basically all the dishes were dirty and in their rooms. Pretty disgusting. So as you can tell from here, I've zoomed in a bit and I'm starting to get very annoyed. Zzz, I put there as like a little bit of lightning going off inside of me, a little skull there. If you can see that small detail. I like the pube jungle for some reason. There's just something I like about graphically how it came out. I know that sounds gross. So this happened literally, okay? Just my girlfriend, who I've now been with, we actually celebrated our anniversary yesterday, 18 years together. Love the girl so much. So just love you mode, putting that out there. But she was next to me when this happened, right? That's the only difference kind of in the story here. So trying to get some sleep, but I can't because all I hear is boom, 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 right? Boom, boom, boom. So I kind of walk out of the room. Hey, man, would you mind turning that down a bit? I have to be at work pretty early tomorrow. Okay, sure, whatever. So he turns it down, right? And this, mind you, was all in the living room, supplied by me, right? The sound system, the TV, everything. So back to bed, right? Here's a clever art trick. I did basically stat this same panel. You could probably tell a little bit that these booms were kind of stuck on this one. When I, if I'm not mistaken, I think I drew this one first, and then I did this one second, where I whited out the face, and then drew a different face, different expression, and added the booms here that I cut out and kind of put on there. So a little bit of cut and paste work, but saves work on actually having to draw the same panel twice. I like how it works. It starts off this little bit of the story and then starts off this little bit of the story where it should be going better, but of course, no, there's another boom. So there's me getting woken up again. And of course, not taking any more, kind of angry, slam the door open because my room was pretty much next to the living room. So for sure I would hear it. So I say, are you seriously trying to mess with me? I just finished telling you. And he cuts me off. You know what, man? I have to say it. I'm getting really tired of your attitude, man. Like, you've been at it for most of the day. Give it a rest. And again, this was the kind of reaction I got from him. I mean, why are you being so childish? And this is the point where, you know, this obviously didn't happen. Once again, we've got Big Baby coming out of kind of an orifice. It was an orifice at some point. So for this one, I used the belly button. He's coming out of there. But what I did was basically, you know, give him shit and tell him, you know, this is my stuff. And it got to the point where my roommate was like, oh, it's like, you want to punch me? You want to punch me? And I actually said, yes. And I don't know what's stopping me, but I totally want to, but I'm not going to. That actually happened. There are only 2 infantiles in this household, and I am neither of them. Blame only yourself for what comes next. Your utter lack of basic respect is what brought this on. So Big Baby grabs him, squeezes his neck. I've always liked this to denote something like this. I don't know exactly, like choking, I guess. No sound coming out. Like sound wants to come out, but it's not. I don't know exactly where I've seen this, but I know like it's used fairly standardly. Yes, there's a fuck you finger on purpose. A lesson in auditory appropriateness is most definitely in order here. So early on, Big Baby had quite a florid, I guess, vocabulary is what I'd say. I kind of eased off that a little bit later on in the series. But originally he was supposed to be beating everyone up, but using like just the best vocabulary ever. The most scintillating vocabulary. So boom, what I actually wanted to do and didn't, Big Baby does it. So he smashes the roommate's head right into the speaker here. Now you can enjoy the very latest in surround sound technology up close and personal. Unfortunately, this particular sound system will clearly not be of any use to me moving forward, because obviously I've destroyed part of the speaker there. Best to take this down right away. I like this little detail of as he does it, that the jack in the back just kind of boom, comes out, right? This should help in cleaning the place up. And other roommate kind of pops in at just the wrong time, right? Hey guys, what's all the racket? You guys partying out here? And yes, purposely kind of did a close-up shot on Big Baby's bulge here. Just, again, to be offensive to some people anyway. So funny to others, I guess. It would seem that you have made your entrance at a most inopportune moment for yourself. Who are you, dude? The last thing you'll see. Grow. I like sometimes using sound effects to just be the actual word of the action that's going on. I don't know, it's a thing. Again, the huge package sitting on the bottom of the panel. Just another gross touch, I guess. So whoosh, the fingers grow, stab him. Ah! Is it me or did the temperature just drop in here? I'm going to need a blanket. Squish, so clearly something kind of gross and bloody is happening there. There's something I really like about the depiction of blood over the volumes here of Big Baby's muscles and face. The fact that I put it, colored it in black as the black and white comic makes it a little goopier and more disgusting. And I like that I threw in the spatter all over Big Baby, but I made the mask well enough that I didn't get any here in the background. Not too much anyways, there's a little bit here. And it was important not to get any directly in his eyes or on his teeth, right? So I think that worked out really well. Assuming that when the blood spurt happens, his mouth is closed, right? And boom, we get to see what Big Baby did with that roommate. So he's, making, basically as a ventriloquist, kind of, making the skin blanket of the roommate talk. Now then, is that not much better? It's finally time for a little bit of peace and quiet, some peaceful, cozy sleep. Merry Christmas and a good night to all. I love ventriloquism. I figured I'd have to throw that in there to make, you know, what was going on obvious. And yeah, so he's basically made a skin blanket, right? You see the hands down here being pulled down, the leftover of his face and stuff. And at this point, I didn't think that I would be bringing back either of these characters. Every time I'd read a story and character would kind of perish, that was the end of it. But later on, as I got to a point where the stories got a little more involved and there's a bit more continuity and things I could go back and take from, this gentleman, the skin blanket, and this gentleman over here with the head and the speaker, who I assumed is dead, actually was not dead and makes an appearance. You know, I did make his finger twitch here, so yeah, you can assume maybe he's not dead. I forgot about that little detail. And I like, just because I'm here, the kind of Todd McFarlane-esque ideas of like layering things, how his hand overlays this panel here. He's out of the panel on the side, on this side here. This guy overlaps this bit. It really helps create a lot of depth in this page, right? With just a few simple tricks, really pops him into the foreground and Big Baby a little more into the middle ground, background kind of area. Really cool. I like it. It's, you know, sometimes you hate your stuff as you're doing it, and then you go back and you're like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And there's some interesting stuff, and that's definitely something I think is pretty cool. Yeah, so those characters will appear later on, obviously. You'll be able to see those when I do the reviews of those later Big Baby issues. So I use this issue as kind of a chance to put in some bit of bonus material, stuff that was used for sketches for covers, rejected covers, basically, right? So for issue 1, this was the original sketch for the cover, and eventually I ended up going with this one. This was a rejected sketch for issue number 2, which I don't think is a bad one necessarily. It's pretty good, but there's just something that didn't work for me at the time. Not quite sure. I think it's pretty cool. And this is what I ended up going with. This is the sketch for issue 2. I guess I was going for more of a focus on the character in those first early issues, right? And less on other elements, right? Just a nice big shot of the character. Issue 3, this was going to be the original cover, which never ended up happening because I did a Christmas cover, right? And that would have been a pretty good one for that issue. And this is for issue 4. I do think these still would have both been pretty good covers, right? Because you're looking at this one, now that you've seen the story, you kind of know what's going on here, but you would see this and like, what the heck is that, right? Or hopefully that'd be the effect. And then this is the rejected cover that I did, and then the one I ultimately chose, the sketch for this issue. And this one was rejected. I'm not quite sure why. It wasn't that interesting. This one's way better, I think. And it would have been the same comic kind of reproduced over and over, which is kind of annoying to have to draw, let's be honest. Digitally could help out, but I didn't want to do that. All this Big Baby stuff was all done by hand, pencils and inks. Big Baby Origins. So this gives you a look into... I may have showed you some of this in the review for the first issue, but I'll go through it real quick. These are just sketches I took from my sketchbook. The first kind of me trying to work out the Big Baby face and the look and stuff. This is the first time I ever drew Big Baby. So the main difference being he doesn't have a nose yet, and he's got a bit of facial paint or tattoos and a Hare Krishna kind of thing. That changed. So take those things off the top of his head and add a nose, and it's basically the Big Baby that we know. As a Christmas treat to you, dear readers, I've taken the liberty of including literally all the preparatory sketches that led to BB's final iteration. He originally had no nose, some face paint, and a Hare Krishna knot top. As I said, hairdo. The lack of a nose was clear inspiration from the early 90s Image comics, the Max pit, but BB never looked quite right without one. I got rid of the face paint, the knot top, and I gave him what I like to call a comic book feet. Who wants to draw those things anyway? And obviously I'm talking about feet. As for BB's alter ego, who still remains nameless at this point, I mentioned his name is Matthew. The first mention of his name happens a little later on in the series. The inspiration for him should be pretty obvious. It didn't take much time to work that one out. The 2 previous pages were basically glimpses into my creative process for covers. Each issue up to now has had a rejected cover and an official one. Since I combined 2 stories for this issue, I had to dump 2 official covers that I actually really liked and create a new design for a Christmas themed cover. I'm basically just repeating what I just said, right? Baby talk. This is my kind of editorial. I'm not going to go through it with you guys on these reviews. Usually just a quick snapshot of where I was at that time. I did include this picture here because this is one of the best Christmases that I can remember as a kid. So I was 11 here, and when I lived in British Columbia as a kid, for a while my dad was in the army, so I moved across Canada many times. One Christmas time they said either we'd celebrate Christmas here or with toys and stuff, or we take a trip down to Mexico for Christmas for 2 weeks. So that's what we ended up doing, and went down to Mexico, drove through Baja California, took a boat across to the mainland, and then spent a week in Mazatlan. So one of my great memories from Christmas as a kid. Next issue, part 1 of a meta journey through the internet. Join us for La Toile Noire, which is the dark web, right? And that is actually what's going to be in issue 4. So I'd already started doing adverts here for issues 1 and 2 in the back. Good opportunity for that. I thought my band Cro-Magnum at the time had put out an album, Born Free. So, try and get some marketing power out of that as well. And basically released this, I do remember vividly, before Christmas, more specifically on my birthday that year. So on December 2nd, 2021 is when this comic came out, and a week later a life-altering event would happen on December 9th, 2021, but I'm not going to talk about that on this review, as it maybe relates more not to this issue but to the next issue, and I'll have more information about that if you're interested in a little while when I do the review for issue 4 of Big Baby. So that is it for today, guys. If you're subscribed and you're checking out my Big Baby reviews as well, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support and for your interest in the stuff that I do. If you're not subscribed but you're still watching, please hit the subscribe button below. It really helps out the channel, helps us grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books as much as we are. So everyone out there, thank you so much for checking out this review of my own stuff, and have yourselves an awesome Sunday.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.